Call our meeting February 16th, Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County to order. Madam Secretary, would you read the roll, please?
Certainly. David Bobzian. Here. Marcia Burke-Bigler. Here. Christopher Dare. Here. Vaughn Hartung.
Here.
Paul McKenzie.
Here.
Lee Gibson.
Here.
Dale Ferguson.
Here.
And Rudy Malfabon.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Serber, would you lead us in the pledge today?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Did you tell him he's not supposed to hold his coffee cup?
Next item, approval of agenda.
Mr. Chair, we should probably remove item 7.1 and trail that to next month.
Okay. 7.1 is a report of the executive director for fiscal year 2018. Any other changes?
No other changes.
Okay. Entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
Other than, Mr. Chairman, removing 3.13 from consent onto the regular agenda.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public input, I've got one card here, Mr. Fitzgerald.
My name is Rob Fitzgerald, the local builder. Just wanted to applaud you all for reordering some of your thoughts on improvements to roads and bridges and whatnot here in town. Looks like the feds might be putting a pretty big infrastructure package together. Hopefully we'll have some of that money coming this way. Some of it is going to be a big lift. I know it is. Spaghetti Bowl being an absolute priority. I think there'll also be some big political lifts because 395 and the 80 corridor are the obvious starting points. Closing on and off ramps that aren't going to be popular in some areas and with some people, I would think might even be something that could get started earlier than a big fix, just to get people used to the fact they're going away, and it would probably improve health and safety. I personally probably put about 2,000 miles a month on just driving around town and witness the same accidents, tie-ups, and backups at the same places every day at the same times. So the big fixes I know might take some time and money and energy, but there might be some little fixes that could come along the ways. I've thought about this at length, and I don't know if it's something being considered, but I think some on and off ramps really should go away. They're not critical, and I don't know how hard it would be to close them, personally. So it's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in public comment? I think item 2.2, accept the monthly summary report for the Technical Citizens Multimodal and Regional Road Impact Fee Advisory Committees. If there's no discussion, I'd entertain a motion. Motion by Commissioner Burke-Bigler, second by Commissioner Hartung. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3, consent agenda items, minus 3.13.
Motion to approve.
And a motion by Commissioner Vaughn, second by Commissioner Burke-Bigler to approve the consent agenda minus item 3.13. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.13.
Mr. Chair, item 3.13 is to approve a professional services agreement with Loomis and Associates for the 2018 Preventative Maintenance Program Project and Design Services and Construction Management, optional engineering during construction, and an amount not to exceed $862,530,000, and authorize the RTC Executive Director to execute this agreement. Brian Stewart, the Director of Engineering, will give you a substantive overview of this item. Brian?
Brian Stewart, for the record, RTC Director of Engineering. This item is our preventative maintenance program. We are hiring a qualified consultant to manage our preventative maintenance, and we're advancing the FY19 design so that we can take advantage of the full year of construction to be able to get the projected amounts of money that we're looking for FY19, which would be in the neighborhood of $6.5 million of preventative maintenance that we're looking for. So this contract with Loomis and Associates provides those services. It gets into the design, provides the bid documents, and then takes us clear through the construction to the end of the year with the construction management services.
Mr. Chairman.
But
Thank you. Mr. Stewart, I just have a brief question. We are funding this with $862,530. If you'll note, under previous actions taken on June 15th, 2017, and I would draw your attention first to summary. This agreement will provide design and construction management for services for the 2018 preventative maintenance program. In June 15th, 2017, we adopted a $5 million amount for design and construction. Why is there design twice? Why do we need Loomis? We've already adopted $5 million for design, and now we're going to adopt another $862,530 again for design, when essentially that should have been part of the $5 million, and the $862,000, as I see it, is for CMAR. So I'm confused as to why the duplicate design need.
Great question, Commissioner. What, in one of the consent items earlier on that was just adopted was a POP amendment that supports this. So basically what we're doing is adding $2.7 million to the FY18 POP as a project because we didn't move some of the projects along. They didn't spend those monies as much. And so therefore we can spend the FY18 money to support this advancing of the FY19 projects with the $854,000 contract. So it's a rolling program that continues.
And I'm, forgive me, it says the 2018 preventative maintenance program. That's a typo?
Mr. Chair, if I may. In June 15th of 2017, we budgeted $5 million in the RTC's budget for the fiscal year 18, which began on 7/1/2017. This contract today is an expenditure of $862,530 for the design services and construction management services that will be attendant with the expenditure of the remaining balance of the $5 million for construction that will begin 7/1/18 through 6/30/19. What we want to do is get the design started now at the beginning, relatively the beginning of the calendar year, so that those designs will be ready when we start the next fiscal year, and bring the $2.5 million that you approved as part of the POP. We'll bring that $2.5 million to the budget on July 1 of 18. I'm having trouble with my years, of 18. So we'll have about $7 million or so available for expenditure in that construction season. So really what this contract does today is allows us to start the design process, to begin and be ready to expend funds beginning July 1 that will be the budgeted money, plus the budgeted money we will put into place for July 1 of 18, and give us a substantial pot of money to make up for some of the preventative maintenance work that we sort of missed during the period of construction of the Southeast Connector. So I'm sure that makes it as clear as mud.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Gibson.
I'm still not clear. If we budgeted $5,000, is the $862,530 coming from the $5 million that we budgeted?
Yes.
No, it's coming from an advancement, so from FY
Okay, let
'19.
me make clear. We have $5 million in the budget. We can obligate funds out of the budget, which this contract obligates those funds.
Can I answer the question?
Stephanie Haddock, the Director of Finance.
Hi, Stephanie Howe, Director of Finance. So, as Brian explained in the, or pointed out in the previous agenda item, you approved an amendment to our program of projects, which we refer to as the POP.
Right.
Okay, and that's our fiscal year 2018 POP. So what we did is we added $2.7 million, increased the funding in the 2018 POP.
So the 2.7 million on to the 5 million.
Yes, we're adding additional money.
Okay.
Now, that additional money is actually money that we had programmed to start on July 1st, 2018 in our fiscal year 2019 program. So we're just moving that money up, and the reason we're doing that is because, as you guys know, we haven't done as much work on the Virginia Street project as we anticipated in this fiscal year. So we have the cash flow funds available, even though those are monies we had planned to start spending in fiscal year 19. We're just moving it up in the schedule, in the months, putting it in 18, so he can start the design on the preventative maintenance program, and then July 1st, or in the summer months, he'll actually get to do construction. So it's just helping advance our preventative maintenance program rather than wait till July 1st of 2018, where you'd have to start the design then, and then the construction would follow. We're just moving it up a little bit.
Do you see where I became confused?
Yes.
I mean, because we allotted money for design, and now we're taking out a completely different contract for design, and it was
Yes.
just confusing to me.
Yes.
It
The
still is
previous
confusing
design
to
was
me.
for previous work, construction work that's already been done and pretty much going to be finished out. I think in your engineering report, you'll see that that's being finished out in 2018, pretty soon. Right. So that work, that design work is already done, and the construction work is in progress and pretty much done now. So now we're starting a new design package for some new preventative maintenance work.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, you will be seeing later this year a revision to your street and highway policy. We've had for a number of years a disconnect, if you will, between our program of projects, our budgeting, and the timing between calendar year and fiscal year. And I think, I know I've been here a while, and I've found this confusing. It's my understanding, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, we are spending money from a budgeted line item in our budget that's current today. That total amount is $5 million. Later in the year, especially after April, when we come back for our budget retreat, we'll be showing you how we can connect budgeted funds from this year with programmed funds from our POP for next year into the budget for next year, so that we have a total pot of something over $5 million, near my calculation, that will be available for this program. But we want to be ready for design and ready for construction management, so we can get these projects out the door early in the summer while we have the construction season. This is a good thing.
It's very good.
I don't think that there was an argument on my part that it was a good thing. That wasn't the question. It was just, I felt like I was buying milk twice.
This is why we want to bring a revised street and highway policy forward, so we can clarify and streamline the relationship between the program of projects and the budget. And if you really want to make it confusing, we can throw Amy's Transportation Improvement Program into the mix, which is another version of the program of projects. And then we have the current, our today's chair favorite component of our CIP, which is the 10-year CIP. So we want to try to reduce the confusion between and the duplication between each of those documents, so these types of items are more clear for both you, the commissioners, the staff, and the public.
You know, the guy that stands at the door at Costco and makes sure that you have everything on your list? That's what it reminded me of here. And I bought 2 milks and only got 1.
So,
Thank you, Mr.
so
Chairman.
staff, the reason we didn't make 910 is because of Commissioner Hartung.
All my fault.
Any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Got a motion from Commissioner Hartung, a second from, you who? Commissioner Dare. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Director,
Mr. Chair, I have a short director's report this month, primarily because I want to spend a fair amount of time on item 6.2, which is our approving our federal priorities and policies for the RTC. But I do want to remind everyone, the RTC Ride and RTC Access, we are going through proposed service changes, and we'll be scheduling open houses and community meetings during February, what's left of this month, February and March, for folks to start getting an idea of what we're going to be doing with the service. Public input will be received and presented to you at the March and at the April meetings. Again, the April meeting, I believe Denise will be talking about under member items, is when we're going to be scheduling our workshop retreat. So this is coming up. As you saw last month, we have had a fairly, David Jickling gave us a fairly detailed discussion and overview of the challenges we're facing as it relates to the labor market, as it relates to ridership, why ridership is changing, and in some corridors declining, in some corridors going up. So this is on the radar and is coming up very soon. There's a flyer here, I believe, that will be looking at that. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and we'll be moving on.
any questions from the board? Federal report?
Mr. Chair, the federal report, again, I'm going to be brief because, again, we have item 6.2 today. They had a little mini government shutdown, but that seemed to disappear. And we are watching with great anticipation the concepts behind the administration's proposals for infrastructure. I think from a policy perspective, and I talked about this on KNPR this morning, I think things like one agency, one decision is a good approach, but I'm still deeply concerned that I'm not hearing or seeing solid proposals from Washington with respect to funding. And, you know, I think we all have you know, $200 million is a drop in the bucket, and programs to just encourage us to absorb more debt by allocating more money to the Transportation Infrastructure Finance Innovation Act, which is a loan program. I believe we used that in this community for the trench, and we haven't used it since. I think we're still paying those. I think the city is paying those bonds off. So, so it's the usual approach: more debt, less money. But we'll try to sell you with less regulation. One statistic, and I'm going to try to have this worked out for the April workshop. It looks like federal funds total from NDOT, RTC, funds allocated to the highway system, funds allocated to the transit system, throwing in successful grants, discretionary grants like the Tiger grant we received a couple of years ago and our Small Starts grant, we still are only getting about 24% of our total infrastructure investment from the federal government. Now that changes depending on when you look at what 5-year time period. This was the current STIP I looked at. We see a little more going to Southern Nevada, a little more going to the rurals, but then again, we have the Spaghetti Bowl coming up, so I'm sure those percentages are going to change. My point simply is, if the administration is going to propose more funding for those entities that put a substantial amount of state and local money into the pot, well, in my opinion, we're the poster child for that, because we have substantially demonstrated through our fuel revenue indexing program that we are putting a substantial amount of money. Southeast Connector is an example of $300 million that's gone towards local infrastructure. So when we're back in DC, I think we want to remind everyone that we are putting a substantial amount of state and local resources to our infrastructure, and that we should be rewarded for that. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that under item 6.2. We did submit comments on automated transit buses research program. I think everyone here should know we have a very robust partnership between Proterra, the manufacturer of our electric buses, the University of Nevada, Reno. Correct me if I'm wrong, David, it's the electrical engineering folks over there who are dealing in artificial intelligence and RTC. we're looking at how to implement automation, vehicle automation technologies, so that we can make our transit systems safer. And we've just submitted to the FTA our comments on that. Hopefully earmarks come back. That would be great. That's how I believe we paid for I-580 from here to Carson City. And, stay tuned. We're going to have a more robust discussion about this, as I said, under item 6.2. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? The proposed elimination of Tiger grants in the president's plan, how's that going to affect our?
I've been told that's dead on arrival. That's just not going to happen. I've also been told the Capital Investment Grant Program, his proposal to zero that out is dead on arrival. Oh, that's what I forgot to mention. We did get our FTA rating of the Virginia Street Rapid Extension, and we got a medium-high rating. And we got kudos for a solid financial plan, and I believe they also had some high positive comments about just the partnership between UNR, the City of Reno, and RTC. So once again, that project, I think, stands out as a national model for bus rapid transit and the partnership and what we're trying to do up there by the university and through Midtown. So it was good news. Just got to get them to appropriate that money.
Hey, Rudy, you got something for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wanted to mention that Cole Mortensen is our new Chief Engineer and Assistant Director of Engineering at the Department of Transportation, replacing John Terry, who did a great job for us, delivering some big projects, and I think Cole's going to step into those shoes and do well. We released or advertised a request for proposals for an I-80 corridor study from Reno Sparks area to USA Parkway for addressing some of the congestion issues that we're seeing on I-80. We'll definitely coordinate that study with RTC. The City of Reno, we're aware of the Stonegate development approval. The article in the Reno Gazette Journal was accurate. We're not accelerating any projects. We're doing, well, on our, just speaking to NDOT's, yeah, speaking to NDOT's transportation issues, we're not accelerating. We didn't make any commitments to accelerate. Our priorities are still the Spaghetti Bowl and 395 in the North Valleys, but we're not being influenced by that development to accelerate. We haven't made any commitments to accelerate. We're just doing it on a regular schedule that we have in our current plan. We're approaching the point where by the end of the year we want to have a draft environmental impact statement for the Reno Spaghetti Bowl project, so we can start that as soon as possible. And just as the gentleman said during the public comment, that we want to try to get a first phase that's buildable out there and get going on it as soon as possible. But there's a lot of stakeholders that are being informed along the way. That issue of eliminating ramps, we definitely agree that it would be nice to, but we're working with all those stakeholders along I-80 and 580 and 395 on those issues, and hopefully we'll have a reasonable scope of work for our first phase and for the entire project, so that we can get going on it. But I just wanted to mention that we are planning on doing some widening on 395. There's some at McCarran and Clearacre interchange on 395 that you'll see some of that work first. We'll probably have a more comprehensive presentation to this board in the coming months about what our plans are with Reno Spaghetti Bowl and 395 north of the Spaghetti Bowl interchange. We're watchful also on the Trump infrastructure plan. As Lee had mentioned, a lot has to happen in Congress. We're pleased to hear, it's kind of like last year. They wanted to zero out Tiger and other grant programs, and Congress didn't listen to that. I think the same thing will happen on some of those things that are included in the administration's budget won't come to pass once Congress actually passes a budget. Currently, we're operating under an extension to March 23rd, but the good news is Congress, or at least the Senate, seems to have a budget deal worked out for the that they could pass after March 23rd, or before March 23rd, the budget for the rest of all the way through fiscal year 19 for the feds. So it gives us more assurance of funding and allows us to keep plugging along on our projects. But a lot of details to work out. I was hopeful, grateful for Trump's comment this week about that Congress should consider a gas tax, as it hasn't been raised since 1993, I believe. Obviously, a lot of folks in Congress disagree with raising the gas tax, and at the same time, they're pushing for more state and local participation on these projects. And as Lee made the case, we do put in a lot of our state and local funds and have taken those measures through our public votes or the legislative actions to raise money locally in our state or regional areas. So more to come on that. We're going to see what shakes out of Congress, and we're having discussions with our staff about where we can look at projects that could fit the bill, so to speak, for the different programs, at least in the framework that came out, and then ultimately what's developed by and passed by Congress and signed by the President. And any questions?
Mr. Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On a completely different note, Mr. Malfabon, Mr. Gibson, can we have a formal groundbreaking when we start at Pyramid and McCarran? Pyramid and Calle de la Plata? Seriously, it's,
Mr. Chair, if I may.
can we do that?
Mr. Chair, I'm looking at Michael Marino. We'll arrange something.
Because I've been, surprisingly, and I've talked to a number of residents, they still, I talked to a fellow yesterday, he did not know that we're doing that, even though we've, advertised it in a number of places. And I think it would be, a nice thing for the residents of Spanish Springs. It's long overdue. Everybody that I've talked to is just, they're beyond thrilled. So I think just an acknowledgement of RTC and NDOT's participation would be very good for not only us, but for the community. Thank you.
Any other questions? Rudy, when we did the charrettes on the spaghetti bowl, some of the stuff we looked at was for short term was closing the Wells on-ramp, for example. That area is still, we're having 4 to 5 traffic accidents there a week, and it's purely because of the interface between on-ramp and off-ramp traffic there. And have you guys looked at that any further?
We did. We had our consultant look at that, what type of fix that would achieve for us, and they felt that the real issue is not having the lanes, the number of lanes on 395 or 580 to receive it, especially 580 southbound. So it is something that we're looking into. Rather than closing Wells Avenue is something that's, we're not calling it Spaghetti Bowl Phase 1, but look into a concept of where we could easily widen. We'd have to buy some property to the east of 580, kind of south of the interchange, build some lanes there. Rather than closing the Wells Avenue on-ramp, look at what we can do in the nearer term while we're doing the EIS for Spaghetti Bowl. So we're looking into that option. It might be something that's doable. It might be even something that could qualify for the infrastructure program if we put a lot more state funds to it. 80% state is what I'm expecting, and then 20% federal. It could be something that we get out and develop separately, because what we need is more lanes on the main 580 portion so that it could clear out and receive the traffic from the ramps. I also did, our team was looking at developing a first phase project that was more the Nugget side of I-80 and some improvements at the Spaghetti Bowl, and I asked them flop that around. Really, the Wells Avenue is the problem. Do Wells Avenue and what ramps we can do at the Spaghetti Bowl interchange. So they're developing that concept, and they'll. It's very early in the process, so they don't have really hard numbers on the cost estimates, but they're developing that concept further.
So that a year and a half, that we might see something there?
It's possible. So we will have our team come back when they're further along with this concept, but it would require us to purchase some right-of-way. So I wanted Cole to get with our right-of-way folks and talk about what's some early acquisition timelines for acquiring 2 parcels that we would need for that concept of widening south of the Spaghetti Bowl,
Okay, and then
southbound.
and 2 other questions. So that's 400 to 500 more accidents we're gonna have there before we do something. And then the other thing is, have we got a program in place to pay for those, have we got a program to pay for that, or is that just generally?
Yes, what we do is, if there's some additional state funds that are in the State Highway Fund, we would put those to work. If it increases, or we have to increase our budget authority, we have to go to the Interim Finance Committee, as I did last week. NDOT had submitted a flat budget, but we knew that we'd true up or correct our budget to the actual revenues based on the legislature passing some additional revenue for NDOT that the governor signed. So we basically look at what funds are in the highway, state highway fund that are available that maybe they're available, but they would exceed our capital improvement budget. So we just would get IFC approval, explain it to them. They would allow us to access and use those funds. So I believe that there's some additional revenue available based on some of the revenue projections. We submit a budget that was flat, and sometimes, as we've seen, people are driving more. There's a little bit more, about a 3% increase in gas tax from people driving more with this economy. We would want to see what money's available, put that money to work for a project like that, to add it. That's how we can add a project in addition to what we already have in our plan.
Mr. Hartung?
Actually, I have a question. That's on a whole different note as well. What are we doing, and I've heard little talks, but of when we are heading out to Tri-Center, past the Nugget. I know Nugget's an issue, obviously, right in that area, and all the way to Spaghetti Bowl. But I've noticed, just in me coming off into Sparks, we're backing up more and more and quicker as we go out to the Tri-Center because they just have more jobs. And more jobs, and truth, the next couple of years, we know for a fact that they're hoping to expand that greatly, which means more cars on the road. And I appreciate that we're going to do something with Spaghetti Bowl, because obviously that's a must. But we're creating something strategically that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, that we're adding more and more jobs. I'm not sure if Story County has any responsibility to help expand that, which I can say out loud, I'd like to see them try to do something. That'd be great, because they're creating this. And then what are we doing? And even if we can't do any quick fixes, maybe it'd be wise to really look at finding some ride-share things to get some cars off the road or something of that fashion. And so I know that I've heard Tesla is working on doing their own ride-share stuff, which is fantastic. But I do think it's important that we anticipate the growth, because if not, we're just going to clog up. And no matter what you do at the Spaghetti Bowl, it's only going to get worse and worse.
There was a previous presentation a couple months ago on that issue of what's some of the alternatives for transit, and also involving, trying to reach out to Story County to participate in some of these solutions. We're concentrating, NDOT concentrates on the freeway system that we own and operate, and the corridor study that I mentioned is just the first step into some things. But we also can look at, as we've done interchange improvements to get better operations of some of the ramps. We know that everybody goes to that same off-ramp right there at USA Parkway. We've made some improvements. We have a signal project coming up at Electric Avenue and USA Parkway that was awarded recently, so that'll help the flow of traffic. But the bottom line is that we can do so much now, and the big fix is coming later. But transit is really the opportunity to try to consolidate trips and reduce congestion in the near term. Lee, you probably have some
Mr.
comments.
Chairman, if I may, we had a meeting last week with EDON, the Tri-Center folks. We're working to form a transportation management association out there and begin the promotion and further expansion of our van pool and rideshare activities. Our van pool program is growing by leaps and bounds. I don't have the statistics in front of me right now, but I know we're well over 110 van pools operating throughout, and I think it's 35 out to the Tri-Center. One of the interesting developments we're going to have to deal with in a meeting I had with the Tri-Center was, why do folks locate at the Tri-Center? One of the reasons is privacy. So they would like us to, or they want Story County to develop like a hub, and then their shuttles would then come pick up their employees. So that's going to be a critical element of any sort of transit activity out there. But point I wanted to make is we are having those discussions to encourage van pooling and encourage ride sharing. And I'm also pleased to say that Story County's been a partner in this. They've been at the meetings. They're working through the issues as well. The beauty in a lot of this is it's low-cost hanging fruit. Actually, the employers, will carry the burden of the cost, as well as the users, because it's just cheaper to carpool and van pool than it is to drive your single occupant vehicle out there. So it's just an issue of trying to match people up and help them with their geographic, getting their geographic requirements aligned, and then getting them to do this. So,
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Any other? Mr. Hartson?
So, Mr. Malfabon, back on the Wells on-ramp, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but I did stay in a Holiday Inn Express recently. Have we thought about restricting lanes 1 and possibly even 2? Because when the issues that I've seen going through there are the extremely fast, high-speed traffic in lanes 1 and 2, and then somebody decides from lane 1 or 2 that they want to get over, and it's those lane changes. So if we restrict those lanes somewhere, right after getting on at let's say Center Street, if you restricted those 2 lanes just temporarily to see if the accidents actually fell, and force people to, if you're in the right-hand lane, you're going to have to deal with that. But if you're in the 2 left-hand lanes, the 1 and 2 lanes, then you're through traffic. End of discussion. You are heading east. And I know that this was highly successful when we did some of the repairs on 583-95, where we did those lane restrictions, and we had very, very few incidents there because we forced people to stay in those lanes. And then 1 lane actually was all the way through that popped out at about Moana.
I would have to check to see, but I thought that we had looked at some options with lane restrictions, and I think that the issue became positive controls or barriers or something to keep them in there. We've tried in Las Vegas those flexible posts. People just drove right through them. But you would have to have a solid barrier to prevent that. I know that during construction of the I-80 Design Build project, we did have some of those types of restrictions. We did have a lot of barriers. I don't know, Cole, if you have any comment on that, but I know that the team was looking at some limitations or restricting certain movements. One of the early concepts they looked at was if you got on Wells Avenue, you were only getting on I-80. You weren't going to 580 or 395. But they've since come up with some alternatives that would allow all the movements there. I think that as we get further developed with our what our preferred alternative is, we'll come back with a presentation to our group. Oh, Nick, our project manager's here. So Nick, you can answer that question about the restrictions and the options available, and whether we have the
Nick,
space and room to do
we
that.
talked about this.
Yes, we did.
In the caucus room upstairs, we had a conversation about it, and I'd love to just see a temporary, do it for a month and see if your accidents fall. It would be, and I recognize that there are going to be some people who, sort of jump the hoop, but overall, I think people, try to obey those temporaries.
I think before we get animal control called on us for beating on this dog, we've got a presentation on this on the agenda. So rather than beat on you twice, let's wait until the presentation to discuss this any further. Any other comments? Thank you, Rudy. We appreciate it. Item 5.1, acknowledgement of the 4th Street Prater Way monthly progress report.
Mr. Wilbrecht, the project manager, co-project manager, is going to come up and give us an update. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you. Jeff Wilbrecht, project manager of the 4th and Prater. Thank you, RTC board and chairman, for letting me speak today. Clicker. So this is the month update for January. So the project's been moving pretty well over the last month in January. The contractor's about 558 working days. That's roughly 68% of the total working days on the contract. This is a working day contract, and so that's what we count as part of the completion. It's not included in the board report, but last Monday there was a weather day associated with the snow that occurred. And to talk about the budget, the contractor's about $21 million spent, and that's as of the most recent progress payment of end of January. Again, just to kind of go through it, the utility work is huge on this project. We're starting to close up all the Tumwa elements. So Tumwa had a huge betterment improvement that they incorporated into our project. And we're just starting to complete the last little remaining items. There's miscellaneous service connections and fire hydrants and those types of things going on. Also, the cities of Reno and Sparks have a lot of storm drain improvements that we're working on for them. And we're really doing a lot of work in Reno right now, mostly from essentially Sutro into Evans Avenue. And so that has been progressing pretty well, and the contractor's been doing good on that element of work. Continue with the utility work. So a lot of the utility work's kind of now moving into Reno. There's a lot of streetlight conduit. Streetlights are going up now. If you look at the south side of the road from Galletti to essentially 6th Street, there's a lot of streetlights on the south side of the road now. They're also doing traffic signal conduit and foundations. There's new traffic signals foundations in Reno at Sage Street, Sutro, and Galletti. And then the BRT element of the project. This is a transit project, so we're starting to do the electrical connections for these large, nice BRT stops. In Sparks, a lot of the utility work is kind of starting to wrap up. So there was last month, all the conduit was in the ground. The utility company started doing the actual tie-overs. NV Energy is done in that area. Verizon is done in that area. And all that's remaining is Charter and AT&T. And I talked to them earlier this week. There should be done mid-March to kind of in that time frame. They have a lot to do with the tying and the connection of the fiber optic. And then we've also placed a lot of the traffic signals in Sparks. They have the nice black traffic signals. So there's new ones up all over Sparks. To talk about kind of the civil improvements, as I kind of stated earlier, in Reno, between Galletti and it's at Sutro Street now, there's all new sidewalk, all new curb and gutter. And the contractor's really starting to just wrap that up and clean it up so that they can then begin on the north side of the road within that section of the project. Similarly, the I-80 section of the project, the contractors swap traffic so that they can start working on the north side of the intersection or the interchange. And that's going to start really happening mid-March and into April. And then the BRT stops. So in the photo back, I didn't talk about it, but our BRT stops are starting to take shape. So the bottom photo there is the actual steel that's been erected at the 15th Street BRT stop. And like I said in the past months, that's the mock-up station. So that's going to be kind of used as the sample to judge all future BRT stops on 4th and Prater on. So they all look the same. They're all consistent. They all look really precise. So, continuing into March, we're going to continue that storm drain work into Reno. We're going to continue the placement of curb gutter sidewalk on the south side of the road. Really, all that's remaining is from Sutro to Wells Avenue, and then they're going to jump to the north side of the road. So into March, that's going to flop. So work on the north side of the road is going to begin. And then to continue with the dry utilities. So there's, like I've said in the past, there's a huge density of dry utility work that needs to start happening in Reno between Evans Avenue and Wells. And that's going to start up pretty soon. And then in Sparks, we're really starting to kind of wrap up Sparks. There's still a lot of work going on, but it's really getting close. Coming into March, it's weather dependent. We're going to start paving through Sparks. So 18th Street to I-80 essentially is going to start getting paved, hopefully beginning of March once the weather allows. And then we'll really start wrapping it up. There's still the BRT stops in Sparks that we need to be working on, 15th Street, like I said. And then there's ones at El Rancho and Galletti that are going to really start kicking up. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? I noticed that this is the first month since the project started that we didn't give many days. Good job.
Thank you.
Need a motion to accept report.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Vaughn, second by Commissioner Nahar. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. 6.1,
Mr. Chair, go ahead.
receive a report and presentation on Nevada Department of Transportation, Reno Sparks Freeway Traffic Study, and provide input.
Nick looks like he's limping.
Good morning, everyone, board members. For the record, Nick Johnson, NDOT Project Management. So I have a brief presentation today. I'm going to go over a couple of things. As many of you know, we've been working on a freeway traffic study for quite some time now, and we're getting to the end. So I want to give you all the results that, that we're finding in this traffic study, but also to give you an update on the projects, studies, things that the department is actively engaged in right now within the community and along the freeways themselves. And with that, that's a good segue here to this first slide. So this map here kind of lays out all the active projects or things that we're currently working on within the community and that we're moving towards. So just to start, that light blue colored that you see there, that's part of the Reno Sparks Freeway Traffic Study. And so we're coming to the end of that here, so I'll show you the results of those in a minute. But there's also some construction projects coming out here. So that orange, that small orange line just north of the Spaghetti Bowl, we'll be doing a pavement preservation project between the Bowl and McCarran, Clear Acre interchange, and I'll talk about some of the details and some operational improvements there at the interchange that hopefully will help with some of that southbound congestion coming into town. But then we have some planned projects moving north into the North Valleys. And one project that I forgot that I didn't show up here is we have another pavement preservation project on I-80 from Keystone to the California state line. And again, with that project, that's going to start construction this summer. There are some minor operational improvements, including auxiliary lanes, ITS improvements, things like that, as well as some minor improvements to the USA Parkway interchange to, again, help with getting the traffic on and off the freeway so we can keep the freeway flowing out there on I-80. So jumping into the traffic study, we'll start with US 395 headed north into the North Valleys. You see a chart up here, and this is what we're finding in 2040, the number of lanes required to keep the traffic moving smoothly. So we have 4 lanes, essentially from McCarran Clear Acre interchange all the way out to Lemon Drive, and then north of there to Stead, 3 lanes, and adding auxiliary lanes. And so what that means, the auxiliary lanes, those are basically those lanes between where an on-ramp of one interchange comes on the freeway and the off-ramp to the next one. So you don't have that taper, that merge of traffic coming onto the freeway. It just continues down to the next off-ramp. And that helps with, finding gaps in traffic, allowing people time to merge and weave onto the freeway safely. So you can see here some of the results. One thing to note on this, and I show this graphic here on the bottom right, in the northbound direction between Panther and Golden Valley, we'll probably need a braided ramp just because there's so much traffic and the weaving movement there. So I put that graphic down at the bottom. I think I've shown this to many of you with the Spaghetti Bowl presentation as an example, where you got a bridge going over the traffic leaving the freeway there, so you're separating out that weaving movement. So we'll talk. So here's the US 395 projects that we're working on and that we have planned to get out to construction. So as I mentioned, this summer we'll start on a section between the Spaghetti Bowl and the Clear Acre McCarran interchange. It's a pavement preservation project. We're not adding lanes. That's being covered in the Spaghetti Bowl EIS, just due to the impacts of widening that section of freeway right there. But one important thing to note is some operational improvements from that southbound on-ramp at Clear Acre. Right now, that when you get on there, it just kind of gets shoved into traffic. It slows down traffic, on that through lane there, and that results in backup, along US 395. So in this project, we're going to restripe that into its own lane to merge with the McCarran on-ramp. So with the intent that those number 1 and number 2 lanes on southbound 395 can continue to flow while that traffic gets on the freeway safely. Following that 2021, 2022 frame, originally this was a pavement preservation project, but in light of the results that we're getting from the traffic study, we're also looking at widening. So this is a fairly large project from McCarran all the way north to Lemon Drive and looking at those improvements at the Lemon Drive interchange. We're just starting the design of that right now, so we're working on it and hope to get that out to construction here in the 2021-2022 timeframe. And then following that, the next section from Lemon Drive out to Stead and widening the freeway there, which was 3 lanes each direction and those auxiliary lanes. So now out to the other hot topic, I-80 East. The results of this study was shown that we do need 3 lanes in each direction from essentially East McCarran all the way out to USA Parkway. Now, as part of the study, we also looked at a couple of different concepts on what we could do, particularly from Vista out to USA Parkway, because that's a very challenging area. So you can see there's a high dollar cost with that. That's a very challenging area, especially just east of Vista Interchange there, going through the Truckee River Canyon, and some NEPA challenges in and of itself. So there'll be some work to do on this section here, but I believe that, as Rudy mentioned, let's get more focused on the Spaghetti Bowl, and work our way out in all these areas. I did mention that we do have an upcoming project that we're working on the design of right now. It's a smaller project, but one of the challenges we're faced right there at the interchange is the ramps getting backed off, or the off ramps getting backed up onto the main line I-80. So we're looking at extending those acceleration and deceleration lanes, creating some aux lanes, and also putting a signal in on the north side of that interchange to help keep traffic flowing. And when we do get backups, they can stay within the aux lanes rather than on the main line, and we keep those lanes moving safely. Now, for the other areas that we had here, let's start on I-80 on the west side main line. What we're finding is a 3rd lane, especially in the eastbound I-80 between McCarran and Keystone. And then as far as 580 southbound, some of this area is covered with the Spaghetti Bowl, but the big thing here is getting auxiliary lanes between all these interchanges, because there's some very short taper ramps there emerging that that cause traffic to slow down, similar to southbound 395 at Clearacre when we get heavy congestion. So to wrap this, at least the traffic study, we're putting costs to a lot of these proposed improvements, running cost-benefit analysis, and drafting the report as we speak. So we'll hope to finalize that here in the next month or so and get that out to everybody. And so the last update I have is here on the Spaghetti Bowl, which kind of ties into not only the traffic study, but some of the questions you have. There's a lot of text up there on the screen. The short of the story is we got a lot of balls in the air. We're doing a lot of work right now. Everything from updating, the alternatives that everybody has seen, based on feedback and comment, to cranking out all the environmental documentation and studies so that we can start preparing this draft environmental document. But most importantly, I think since I believe it was April, May timeframe when we really started our outreach campaign, I think we're well over 100 individual meetings, whether it be with agencies, yourselves, stakeholders in the community, really trying to understand what the community needs and to create a project that is right for this community. So we have a lot of things going on. Concurrently with this effort, as Rudy mentioned too, I think as Mr. McKenzie, you asked earlier, what are we looking at short term? We're trying to look at those things right now. I mean, there are some challenges in what's included in this NEPA document and what's considered to be its own independent project. But what we're trying to do is to come up with a project that not only aligns with what we're proposing with the Spaghetti Bowl project, but that hopefully we could get done sooner than later, to provide some benefit to the folks out there while we work on this greater fix. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at how we're going to phase this over time, how we're going to fund it, all kinds of things. So we're very busy with this, and we're moving ahead very, very quickly. We hope to have that draft document available for everybody to review by the end of the year. And from that, if we did our work right, hopefully we can move forward pretty quickly after we get through the draft EIS. And so with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Hartung?
So on the I-80 East results, it says that we have NEPA challenges. Don't we own enough right-of-way out there? I mean, what would the, I mean, there's no cultural resources, maybe a headlight ring from a 62 Bug that might be some type of cultural resource, but I can't imagine what the challenges are in that right-of-way.
I don't know if we have all the right-of-way, to be honest with you, but there are some cultural areas out there. When we get just east of there, there's petroglyphs down below, very close to the roadway. Also, on the north side, there's a big section that's considered park, even where we have our slopes there. So that creates a challenge from the 4F perspective of NEPA and things like that. So they're not, it's things that we can work through, for sure. It takes time, as you know, it takes time to get through those things. There's also going to be some constructability challenges through there. I mean, going back to that graphic that we're looking at, those are some very tall walls. So when you start building walls that tall, most likely you're shutting down a complete direction of traffic
Can't
to
you
get
just
in
get
there.
rid of an emergency lane?
Well, what's that?
Can't you just get rid of an emergency lane and use it, use it that way? Just scoot all the traffic over?
Oh, yeah, we can find ways
Number
to get
one.
traffic going, but
I mean, I think the roadbed is wide enough to carry the traffic, but, because you've got a full emergency lane on the, on the far right side.
yeah, we do have a full shoulder out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'd manage that. I mean, you would keep traffic flowing in each direction, but it would likely be restricted in one lane. You'd be under construction for a considerable amount of time. So there's some challenges. Like I said, you can get through it. It'll just take some time.
Okay. That, it's something we're very short on, sadly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Any question? Mr. Gibson, do you have a?
Nick, first off, I'd like to thank you for working so cooperatively, and whenever we get together with you guys, it's the family. So I really appreciate the coordination. Just a couple of things. Do you have an idea when we're going to need to do an RTP amendment to include all of these revised and updated concepts so our plan and the NEPA document are consistent?
That I don't know, and I might have to.
Okay.
At least the things that come out of the traffic study, I think those are going to be down the road, because this is a planning document, so our planning folks are going to look at that, and we'll have to do that. But I do imagine that here in the near future for the Spaghetti Bowl itself, as we move through and we identify phases, especially looking at a phase one, or if there's anything we can do short term, that we'll work with you guys on getting an amendment done.
And then just for full disclosure, Mr. Mortensen and I discussed this yesterday in a meeting, and I want to just have you perhaps comment. When do we need to have a financial plan put together so we can demonstrate to the feds that we can pay for this?
And I could be, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have to demonstrate a financial plan for the next phase. And so that could be engineering right away rather than construction as the next phase, and then update that as we know more for the first phase of construction. So what that means is, I'm thinking here as we get towards the end of the year when we have our draft EIS is when we really start needing to put the numbers down and how we're going to develop that financial plan for the first few phases of the project.
Thank you.
So I know you're scheduling individual meetings with some of the council members to give them updates on this, and I'd invite you to probably come and give this presentation, not just to the city of Reno, but to the other public bodies as well. There's a lot of interest in this update and how we're going to proceed with this, because it's not just the North Valleys that are accepted, although they may be the loudest. There's a lot of areas of this valley are affected by the congestion that we're fighting right now on our two main arteries.
Mr. Chairman, and if I could make a comment about financial plans, for the benefit of some of the board members that weren't here before, I previously made a comment, I think it was last month or the month before, about The Transportation Board did authorize the department to prepare a biennial budget request that anticipates bonding against some of our regular fuel tax revenues. So, and Reno Spaghetti Bowl and some other projects in Southern Nevada were included in that. So as we put that together and go through the budgeting approval process, this is at the forefront, the Reno Spaghetti Bowl portion at least. I-80 definitely is further out there, and as we get better cost estimates and I'll go through the other corridor study, which will take about a year, we can definitely continue the process of looking at what the costs are and how we could pay for these options, what's kind of near-term, mid-term, long-term.
Thank you. And I know that there's a lot of misconception amongst the public, not usually the people that attend these meetings, but amongst the public in general about how fast you can do these. The process is long and arduous, and then you decide whether you got money or not. So we appreciate your work you're putting into this, and it was less than 2 years ago that we started talking about this priority, and to have NDOT moving this fast on it is truly appreciated. Any other comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
That would bring us to your federal priorities, Mr. Gibson.
Mr. Chair, item 6.2 is to approve the RTC federal priorities and provide direction accordingly. Amy Cummings, the Director of Planning, will handle this.
Thank you. As you're all familiar, RTC will be participating in the Chamber of Commerce's visit to Washington, D.C. in March. So we wanted to get feedback from you on the federal priorities that we expressed to our delegation and others in Washington, D.C. when we were there. And they're laid out in your packet. So we started with the transit priorities, and first and foremost is Virginia Street and receiving the full funding that we've submitted multiple grant applications for through the Capital Investment Grant Program, as well as Tiger and the Bus and Bus Facilities Program. We also want to emphasize the importance of our alternative fuels program, and that means replacing our diesel buses with electrics. We do have 17 on order this year, but we need to replace almost half of our fleet over the next few years because they're getting to that 12-year age, and we want to be able to do that with electric vehicles to improve our air quality. But there is a cost challenge associated with that. We are also maxed out at the Villanova Bus Maintenance Facility. We've completed our upgrades to make that electric vehicle ready, but should we have the resources to expand service, we don't have the space at that facility to add more buses. So as part of the Washoe County Lands Bill, we're proposing additional land for a future bus maintenance facility, and that's something we want to continue to monitor. We also want to highlight the research and innovation in developing autonomous transit vehicles that we're currently working on with UNR. In terms of highway priorities, you've just discussed the majority of those. Improvements and funding to improve the Spaghetti Bowl, US 395 widening, improvements on I-80, as well as the Pyramid 395 connector, and maintaining our support for I-11 through northwestern Nevada. In terms of policy priorities, we're highlighting the importance of fully funding the mass transit account, fully funding the Capital Investment Grant Program, which again is one of the funding sources we're looking at for the Virginia Street project. We touched on earlier this meeting some of the environmental streamlining opportunities that we'd like to pursue, including the Buy America requirements for utilities, which does slow down some projects because utility companies aren't always used to dealing with those requirements on their projects. Restoring advanced refunding, which again we've talked about at previous meetings. That's a mechanism RTC would like to be able to use to refinance our debts so that we can achieve lower interest rates when those are available. Again, restoring the alternative fuel tax credits and supporting public-private partnerships. And an item I would like to add that was not printed here is to support the Washoe County Lands Bill that's also moving forward. So we would be happy to add any additional priorities and take any direction that you may have for us on this item.
Any questions? Mr. Bobzien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to note that I have a business relationship with the Conservation Lands Foundation related to the Washoe County lands legislation. So with that, I've got a significant issue with that. So with that, I'd like to, with that disclosure, I'd like to go ahead and recuse and step out of the room for the rest of this one.
Any other comment?
I have a question.
Good.
It's just my lack of knowledge. Is the 11 coming through here? Do we know the Highway 11? I saw that on the, do they know what they're doing with that?
I'll respond to that. So the congressional language was that it would generally follow the alignment of US 95 up to I-80. So it doesn't designate that it's coming through Reno, but NDOT is doing a long-range transportation plan called the One Nevada Plan. And part of that development, we've added scope to look at alternative corridors that are available for I-11 in northern Nevada up to I-80. So it's very much conceptual, but trying to get it advanced so that we can accelerate the environmental, go right into the environmental process. Once we have some alternatives that make sense, then the environmental process will take place to define the exact corridor that I-11 could take in northern Nevada to I-80. So there's no,
In other words, we don't know.
there's nothing, there's nothing set in stone right now about where I-11 is going in northern Nevada
I've
to
had people
I-80,
tell me they know where it's going. And
other than it's going to hit I-80 at some location.
Thank you.
It's going to Las Vegas.
Exactly. There you go.
Any further comments?
No.
So we need, got a motion, second?
I second that.
Got a motion by Commissioner Vaughn, a second by Commissioner DeHart. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We took full 7-1. Have we got any legal issues? I have no public comment cards. Is there anybody who wishes to speak in public comment? Any member items? Well,
Mr. Chairman, I have a member item. I'd like to thank Fidel Salas. He helped us get ready for the meeting. I actually had an opportunity to go meet with him very briefly upstairs, and so thank you, Commissioner Hartung and Commissioner Burke-Bigler for Fidel and everything he does to help us execute the meeting.
He's part of that design budget also.
with no objection, we stand adjourned.
6 gallon of milk.
So,